Now that we have all of our bung caps and bung adapters firmly in place, we get to really dig in and build the plumbing that's going to tie our whole BlueBarrel system together. So your kit contains all of the parts you need, and you will need a few tools for this. I'm using a tape measure or a measuring tape, pipe cutters, which you can order along with your kit if you don't have a pair already. Your kit includes non-toxic PVC glue, which is water soluble, and a pencil and or Sharpie is always great to have on hand. Now, one thing to note about PVC is that once you glue it, it's cement and you'll never get it apart again. So we want to get this right the first time. What I recommend is laying out all of your fittings in the configuration that they're going to be in the end before you start gluing. And that way, that's going to allow us to fit in some of these variable pieces that we get to design as we go. To keep it simple, I recommend building the vertical T-ins first, and then once those are all built, we'll tie everything in together horizontally. The T-in segments should be a total of about 6.5 inches. And we do have about 1/4 inch or maybe even 1/2 of an inch of tolerance here, so we don't have to be super exact. So I use a measuring tape and I mark with a pencil. I use a little arrow that points directly to the 2 1/4 mark so I know which part of my mark I'm working with. Now my PVC cutter's open like a big parrot's mouth. And I just eyeball it, but I want to make sure that I'm cutting flush. If I cut diagonally, it's actually going to alter my measurement quite a bit. So eyeballing is usually fine. You can use a speed square if you're more comfortable with that. You just ratchet down on the pipe until it separates. With this brand of glue, it actually serves as a primer and a glue. So following the manufacturer's directions, I apply 2 coats. The first coat serves as a primer. Wait about 10 seconds, which is about as long as it takes me to dip again. And I actually dry the applicator as much as possible to avoid too much dripping. And I apply a second coat, and I'm applying the coat both to the inside of the slip fitting and to the outside of the pipe. Now I insert the pipe into the slip fitting and I twist as I go. About 1/4 turn is fine, and that just works out any bubbles that may be in the glue that would lead to leaks if we didn't work them out. I push in as hard as I can and I just hold it for a little while it cures. But even by now I couldn't pull this apart if I tried, so it's important to note that PVC glue is final. Now, because we built our foundation at 2 feet on center, that means that every part of our barrel is at exactly 2 feet from the same part of the next barrel. So we get to connect these horizontally so that there's exactly 24 inches between the center of one pipe and the center of the next pipe. Now, it's not quite as simple as just cutting a 24-inch segment of pipe because, again, we have to figure out how much pipe we're losing in the slip, and we also have to figure out how much excess there we're gaining from the fitting. So the way I like to do this, I snug my fittings right up to each other. And I measure them from center to center. And it looks like about 2.5 inches. So I'm going to gain 2.5 inches, but I'm going to lose 3/4 of an inch. Plus another 7/8. Let's make the math complicated. So I'm going to call that an inch. That's 1 3/4 inches that I'm going to lose and 2.5 that I'm going to gain. So that's 3/4 of an inch that I need to shave off of my 24-inch measurement. So I'm going to measure this to 23 1/4 inches. Now, don't pay too much attention to the measurements I'm giving you, because the moral of the story is you got to measure every time. If your fittings are slightly different than mine, you'll want to be sure your measurements are specific to your fittings. So I'm marking this at 23 1/4, and before I glue, I'm even going to check that once again. So when we work on the horizontal segment, it's best to work from one end to the other, and that allows us to course correct as we go if there should be a mistake. Okay. Again, I'm doing my 1/4 twist or more, at least a 1/4 twist. Okay. Now, since I'm working from one end to the other, now that I've glued this one segment, I have the opportunity, this is going to go in like this, to double check if my measurement was correct. So what I'm doing, I'm visually lining up the end of this pipe with the inside of the slip. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my tape measure ready so that I can read the 24-inch mark. And after I glue this, as I sink it together, I'm going to hold it right up to my tape measure to make sure that I'm getting it just right. Now again, we do have, you know, a 1/4 inch, maybe even up to a 1/2 inch of tolerance in this case, but I do want to get it as accurate as possible. So I'm needing to do two things here. I'm going to put this on at 90 degrees to where it needs to be so I can get that 1/4 turn in immediately as I measure up to my 24-inch mark. And while I still have time, I'm going to look down the barrel and just make sure that my vertical pieces line up. I can also use the table as a flat surface, press down to make sure that I'm all flush. As the manifold grows in length, you may need to move to a surface that's suited for you. So there's the manifold. We do have a few end pieces to put on, but we're going to do that at a later step.